What's going on, you guys? EP09 back here with another video, and today I've got another comparison video for you guys from the 2022 Olympia. Andrew Jack is back for another comparison after I had him up against Hadi Choopan in my last video, and this time we're going to have Andrew Jack going up against Brandon Curry. And I think this is kind of an interesting matchup because both of these guys need one thing in order to start placing higher at the Olympia: legs. Of course, Brandon's already won the Olympia, but the one criticism is his legs. His legs got to come up. Same thing with Andrew Jack. So I did make a video about how I thought the judging was some of the more fair judging actually that we've seen in recent years at the Mr. Olympia. I'll link that video here. But Andrew Jack seems to be the one guy that everyone says, if you were going to say that there was even an inkling of controversy in placings, everybody says that it was with Andrew Jack placing 8th. So, Andrew also said that he was a top 6 shoo-in at the press conference. He figured he was making top 6 for sure. So with all that confidence, I think we should just put him right up against 2019 Mr. Olympia, Brandon Curry, blow right past Big Ramy, right past Samson Dauda, and see if that confidence really was more than just talk. Here we go. So just one note before we start, guys. All of these pictures that you're going to see are from the pre-judging, except for this first one from Andrew Jack. We're going to start with the front double bicep, and I mentioned it in my last video too with Andrew Jack. He did not come out and hit that front double bicep during his individual routine. You know, for a guy to miss his power shot, and it is his power shot, especially at his first Olympia, I mean, look, I know he doesn't have near the stage experience as Brandon, that's for sure, but if he wants to mix it up with the top 6, you know, this is what it's going to take. So I pulled a front double bicep from the night show, and you know, he's still hitting it that slightly unconventional way that he usually does, a little bit more classic, you know, which works for him, works for his structure. It looks absolutely great, but you know, Brandon does have that little twist to the legs at the hips too, so this really does make for a good comparison in this shot. When you look at Brandon in this pose though, he's wider, thicker, he looks denser, drier, his arms are definitely bigger, his lats are popping out, he has bigger wheels with more separation. I mean, look, it just sounds like Brandon has everything in this shot on Andrew, except for the midsection. I would definitely give Andrew the midsection, because I think he probably has the best midsection in the IFBB right now, but overall, you gotta give this one to Brandon. He's just too big and he's too dominant. So, Brandon Curry gets the front double bicep. Moving on to the front lat spread, things actually get pretty interesting here. Andrew looks more striated and separated across the chest, shoulders, and arms, but you can see that Brandon has a superior size in the chest, bigger triceps for sure. I think the lats are probably comparable in this shot for these two guys, but I think for overall proportions, Brandon's lats seem to be matching the rest of his upper body more so than Andrew Jack. I'd give that midsection to Andrew Jack again though, but you know, when you move on to the wheels, man, this makes it a tough one to call. Brandon may have a superior outer quad sweep, but it does look like they are about equally as separated in the wheels. I would say overall shape looks better for Brandon, but Andrew Jack is definitely winning in the calves department, definitely. This really is a close matchup in this shot, you know, and this comparison got real interesting real early into it here between these two guys. But, you know, I guess if I had to choose a winner, man, I'm going to go with Andrew Jack. I think he has more striations overall in this pose, and I like his flow better. I didn't think this was going to happen, but you know what? The front lat spread goes Andrew Jack. Moving on to the side chest, and you know, both of these guys have a great side chest pose. You know what though? I think the entire top 6 had a great side chest at this year's Olympia. Probably if you had to choose one pose that the entire top 6 was hitting like particularly well, that looked particularly good, you would probably call it the side chest, especially for Big Ramy. But yeah, anyway, as for these two guys, the separation in Andrew Jack's lower pecs just makes your eyes draw over to him, you know? I would say that Brandon probably has a bigger chest, but I don't think it looks fuller or more separated than Andrew's necessarily. Brandon is definitely bigger through both the upper body and the lower body though, and he's definitely more separated through the legs. If Andrew would have just bent at the knee just a little bit more, maybe he would have had that illusion of a bigger hamstring and glute area. I mean, the guy is 6'2", so he could stand to give up a couple of inches of height and, you know, still look like he's towering over everybody else. But still, Brandon is rock hard in both the upper body and the lower body, and you just can't deny him the lower body in the side shot on this one. It's just too superior. So, side chest goes to Brandon Curry. Moving on to the back double bicep, I tell you, Andrew really does surprise me here on how well he's able to hang with the top guys in this shot in the upper body. The thickness of his back and the definition and separation was arguably, you could say, the best of the night if we're being honest. I think he could use some more width in the lower lats, especially compared to Brandon, who has an overall bigger back than Andrew. But you know what? I actually think Andrew Jack looks better through the legs on this one. Both these guys need more hamstrings especially, and you can definitely see more separation in the lower body of Brandon as compared to Andrew Jack. But you know, Andrew Jack does have the superior calves, which to me does matter, and it should for the judges too, and I'm sure it does. But you know, like, his calves are far superior to Brandon's. I think Andrew Jack's arms look better in this shot too, so you know what? Andrew's winning this shot. I'm giving the back double bicep to Andrew Jack. Okay, so let's move on to the back lat spread. Now, right from the start, I see something that John Ramato would be very upset about. If you look at Brandon, you see how Brandon is turning his head to the left in this shot? It makes his left side in the middle back look bigger than his right side. Do you guys see that? The symmetry is just off, and honestly, it's kind of distracting once you notice it. My eyes again are drawn over to Andrew Jack on this one because he's ridiculously separated, and I think his symmetry is better than Brandon's. But you know, if I'm going to pick on Brandon for his head turned to the left, it's only fair that I look at Andrew's way he's hitting this pose here too. He looks very, like, straight horizontally across the top of his shoulders and traps, which makes his traps look smaller as the top of his traps are below his shoulder caps. You guys know what I mean? If he had those shoulders drop just a little bit more, this comparison I think would be over. But since they both have a slight discrepancy in how they're hitting the pose, to me anyway, when we move on to compare the lower body, Brandon is just more separated in the hamstrings and glutes, but Andrew looks smoother through the hamstrings, I guess. But I do think size-wise they compare well. Calves again are no question much better for Andrew Jack, so this one is going to go to Andrew for the same reasons that the back double bicep went to him. He's more separated, he looks more symmetrical, and your eyes are just drawn to him. Andrew Jack wins the back shots. Brandon better make up some ground in the remaining front shots, let me tell you. Moving on to the side tricep, and I do see Brandon making up some ground here in this shot. His shoulder cap looks rounder and bigger, his tricep looks thicker, although I will say that Andrew has a more pronounced horseshoe in the tricep here. His tricep isn't as big as Brandon's. I do think that Brandon's holding his own against Andrew Jack in the midsection region in this shot. Even though Andrew's midsection does look flatter, that doesn't necessarily mean it looks better. Through the lower body in this one, it's another no contest. Brandon is bigger, more separated, and that gives him an overall better symmetry in this shot. Andrew Jack actually beat Hadi Chupin in this pose in my comparison video, but in this one, Brandon wins the side tricep, and man, he needed the win at this point. Moving on to the abs and thigh, and I mean, this is a real apples and oranges situation from the first look at this pose. Andrew Jack has a superior midsection in this shot, but Brandon has a superior separation in the wheels. I think since Brandon has 1 foot forward on this one, he does show some more separation and definition in the teardrops, but since Andrew Jack is standing so straight up and down, his legs actually might look bigger than Brandon's. So I think Andrew gets the abs for sure, Brandon might get the thighs. If we look elsewhere to try and break this potential tie situation though, Brandon has a superior lats and arms I think, but I just don't think he has as good of an overall flow as compared to Andrew Jack. It just comes down to the midsection for me I guess, and Brandon does have one of the best midsections you'll find out there in the men's open too, but I mean, I have to give this one to Andrew Jack. That midsection is just undeniable, unreal. Andrew Jack wins the abs and thigh. So for those of you keeping score at home, that makes it 3 for Brandon Curry and 4 for Andrew Jack. And this is all going to come down to the most muscular. You know, for at best, a tie. At best, this is going to be a tie. So let's see what happens here. I guess I would say that overall separation is comparable with these two through the upper body and the lower body. So conditioning-wise, we would call that more or less even. I think they both have a tight midsection. Maybe I would give a slight edge to Andrew Jack in the midsection. You know, it's hard not to. But we have to look at who has the size, who has the mass. Well, you know, guys, bodybuilding is about mass, you know. It's a mass contest in the men's open. And when both of the playing fields are arguably equal in the conditioning and proportions department, Brandon has the bigger arms, bigger traps, bigger shoulders, and just looks better in this pose overall, I think. Those upper body improvements that Brandon made over the last year, they just can't be denied. So you know what? The most muscular goes to Brandon Curry. So there you go, guys. That's 4 for Brandon Curry and 4 for Andrew Jack. It's a straight tie the way I see it. I guess based on this, I would have loved to see Andrew and Brandon standing next to each other, you know, at the Olympia. Maybe if Andrew would have got that chance somewhere during the show, maybe if he would have gotten lucky like Samson did standing next to Big Ramy, and Andrew had been standing next to Brandon during the initial quarter turns, just maybe we could have seen a different story at this year's Olympia. But you know what? That's why I love doing these comparisons. That's why we do comparisons, and that's why these comparisons are so appealing to us guys as fans. I actually saw Lee Priest on the most recent upload from RX Muscle recounting some of Lee's Olympia stories, and he somehow ended up on a rant about how these comparisons that you see online are just not necessary, and I mean, well, you can imagine the things that Lee Priest said about it. None of it was positive. But you know what? I believe that you need to look back at the past in order to have a better understanding of the future, and you know what? I think that keeps our standards high. When we have years like the 2019 Olympia that were lackluster, and we don't look back at guys that were just unbelievable knockouts, just like Dorian Yates or Ronnie Coleman, or, even Hadi Chupin this year, absolutely. You gotta keep your standards high, and this is just good, clean fun too, right guys? Anyway, enough of my ranting. This one is a tie. Leave me a comment down below what you thought of this comparison. Thanks again, you guys, for tuning in to EP09. Be sure to like and subscribe.